Hello students, I am Satwanti Kapoor from Anthropology Department, University of Delhi. Today the topic on which I am going to speak is Introduction to Demography from the paper Demographic Anthropology. Now, about the learning objective of these modules, to know about the history of population studies, to know about the composition of populations, to know about the stage of demographic transition, to know about the relationship of demography with other disciplines. Now first let me introduce the topic. The word demography comes from two ancient Greek words. Demo means the people and graphy means writing or description. Demography is the study of human population dynamics. It encompasses the study of the size, structure and distribution of population and how population change over time due to births, deaths, migration and aging. Now, demography analysis can relate to whole societies or to smaller groups defined by criteria such as education, religion, ethnicity. In clear terms, demography employs scientific methods of studying cause and effect relationship and has its own techniques of interpreting the past and present variables so that they can be used for projecting future population dynamics. You can see the picture above, which clearly shows various factors that influence different processes in with the help of statistical tool, demography studies the population of human beings. As a very general science, it can analyze any kind of dynamic living population, that is, one that changes over time or space. Because demography is interested in change in human populations, demographers focus on a specific indicator of change. Two of the most important indicators of such change are birth and death rates, which also referred to as fertility and mortality. Additionally, demographers are interested in migration trends or the movement of people from one location to another. Shrivastava, 1994. Now, why do we study population demography? It is because demography can play a number of roles and serve several distinct purposes. The most fundamental is to describe changes in population size, distribution and composition as a guide for decision making. This is done by obtaining counts of persons from, for example, censuses, continuous population registers, administrative records of sample surveys. Now, counts of births and deaths can be obtained from vital registrations system or from continuous population registers. Similarly, migration and immigration data can be obtained from immigration registration system or from continuous population registers. Although individual events may be unpredictable, clear patterns emerge when the records of individual events are combined. As is true in many other scientific fields, demography makes use of these patterns in studying population trends, developing theories of population change, and analyzing the causes and consequences of population trends. Various demographic measures such as ratios, percentages, rates, and averages may be derived from them. The resulting demographic data can then be used to describe the distribution of the population in space, its degree of concentration or dispersion, the fluctuations in its rate of growth, and its movement from one area to another. Bhende and Kanika 2000. Demographic analysis can cover whole societies or groups defined by categories such as education, nationality, religion and ethnicity. Educational institutions usually treat demography as a field of sociology or anthropology, though there are a number of independent demographic departments. While demographic cannot offer political advice on how to tackle demographic change, demographers seek to describe the phenomena related to this change and to understand their causes. Now, using reliable data and the statistical processing of these data, modern demographic research embraces many scientific disciplines including mathematics, economics, social sciences, geography, or biology. Demography deals with the vital issues relating to the events relating like marriage or mating, even without it, births, living migration, and hence its relationship can be traced with some important disciplines of pure as well as social sciences. An organic and not mechanical view is taken of everything. History of population studies. During the period of middle of 17th century, the population studies emerged as a discipline in England. Most of its early development took place in England, France, Germany, and a few other European countries. Later in United States of America contributed substantially towards the development of this discipline. The founding father curiosity and concern about the size and characteristics of the population have had a long history. Investigations, however, were sporadic and received little systemic attention, for they were usually undertaken in response to some specific problems faced by the society. The credit for initiating a new field of empirical research in population studies goes to John Grant, an English haberdasher who generally acclaimed as the father of demography or population studies. Now, Grant's observations mainly contained a quantitative analysis of mortality and only incidentally that fertility and migration. The bills of mortality from which Grant obtained the data for his analysis were current reports and burials and christening in a population of nearly 500,000 persons in London and its environs. These reports were compiled and maintained regularly from 1603 onwards by parish clerks. Grant assembled the data contained in these reports for the period 1604 to 1661 and prepared a report which today is regarded as the first systematic and objective study of population. It is said, in the maze of events recorded in the bill of mortality, he sought and found order. The discipline of population studies is indeed indebted to John Grant for laying the foundation of a new science. Some of Grant's English contemporaries and successors share with him the credit of founding population studies. Sir William Petty, 1623 to 1687, an English scholar and Grant's contemporary, was also his friend and collaborator. He inspired and encouraged Grant in his undertaking. Petty's own political arithmetic has considerably influenced the future development of population studies. Now, the early explorers in the field of population studies, hailing from different social strata, were engaged in varied avocations and had different ideologies. Yet these amateurs had one thing in common: their desire and enthusiasm to discover the hitherto unknown relationships, especially in quantitative terms, in the vital processes of life and death. Durand, 1962. Next, we'll discuss about development of demographic studies in India. Pre-independence period. In the ancient history of India, a few references are found to the collection of population data. A detailed description of how to conduct a population data, economic and agricultural census is available in the Arathashastra, a treatise on policy attributed to Kautilya, the Prime Minister of Chandragupta Maurya, 323 to 300 BC. A.C. Banerjee. The Ain and Akbari, compiled by Abul Fazl during the reign of Akbar, contains comprehensive data on population industry, wealthy and characteristics of the population. Some attempts to collect data were, however, few and far between and are today of purely historical interest. Now, census in British India, we'll discuss on it. Data on population became available on a regular basis in India only after the establishment of the system of decennial census in 1872. The beginning of census taking may therefore be considered as the starting point of population studies in India. Many of the earlier census reports have a heavy anthropological impetus, which were mostly written by British administrators who were interested in getting broad understanding of the unknown strange land. They had colonized an equally unknown strange people whose culture was totally different from their own. The British census actuaries contributed much by studying the Indian age data and by constructing life tables on the census data. This is a contribution not only to the development of population studies but also to the discipline of mathematics. Based on census reports from 1872 to 1941, Kingsley Davis, the well-known demographer, produced his monumental work, The Population of India and Pakistan, which is valued even today for its contribution to the progress of population studies in India. The Imperial Gazetteers, while tracing the development of population studies in India, it will not be out of place to mention the Imperial Gazetteer, which contain a thorough and exhaustive account of India and her people. The Imperial Gazetteers were first published in 9 volumes in the year 1881 at the initiative of W. Hunter. A comparison volume appeared in 1882 and was entitled as the Indian Empire, its history, people and products. Later on, revised versions of the Imperial Gazetteer were issued in 1907 and 1909 in 26 volumes. The first volume of the Imperial Gazetteer, in the section on public health and vital statistics, contains a discussion on such matters as nutrition, early marriage, birth rates, the relationship between marriage customs and birth rate, rural-urban birth and death rates, differentials in mortality by sex, religion, rural-urban residence, infant mortality, causes of death, health conditions in the European and the native army, etc. It is interesting to note as one looks back that these are precisely the topics which are today included in population studies. Now we'll talk about assessing stages of demographic transition. Demographers have identified a long-term evolution of demographic processes known as the demographic transition. The demographic transition is key to being able to portray the demographic status of a society in terms of its fertility and mortality levels. There are 4 main stages of the demographic transition. 1. Pre-transitional. In the pre-transitional stage, both fertility and mortality are high and the rate of population growth is very slow. Many societies were in the pre-transitional stage prior to the 1800s. Current example of pre-transitional societies are Angola, Mali, Niger, Somalia, Uganda. All are African nations. Now, early transition. The early transition is a phase of high birth rate but failing death rate. Leads to rapid population growth rate. The more developed countries entered this phase in the early 1800s. The most developing countries were in the phase prior to 1970. Current example of countries in early transition are Benin, Guinea, Mozambique, Rwanda and Zambia. Now, the transitional phase is marked by declining fertility and fairly low mortality rates with moderate to slow population growth rate. The transitional or less developed countries entered this phase in the year 1970s and 1980s, and many are still in this phase. For example, Botswana, Bangladesh, Cambodia and Jordan. Within countries still in the high fertility stage, there are regions or cities which have entered this later stage. Now, post-transitional is the next one. The final stage of the demographic transition is characterized by low birth and low death rate and a return to very slow or negative growth rate in the population. Many of the more developed countries are now in this stage and many of the formerly less developed countries. Each stage is reflected by different fertility and mortality levels as well as different social, cultural and economic behavior and customs. Now, until societies reach the post-transitional stage, demographic rates are in an evolutionary process which the transition stage represent. Therefore, knowing the demographic transitional stage of a society is very useful as it provides guidelines for the likely demographic and social behavior, current and future both. While the demographic transition theory can be used to describe the most probable direction in which demographic rates evolve over time, there are exceptions and they primarily occur with regard to mortality. Reversal in the mortality transition have been documented in association with widespread famines and long-lasting wars, and now in many sub-Saharan African countries with the AIDS epidemic. For these countries, the demographic transition is stalled, if not reversed, as mortality rates climb and life expectancy plummets, sending countries like Botswana back from transitional to early transitional status. Now you can see the source from where this figure has been taken. Now scope of demography is the next topic, which is of very interest to all of you. The scope of demography is very wide. It includes the subject matter of the following: size of the population. Demography is fundamentally study and form of the population size. The students of population study are interested in studying the size of population, the changes that are taking place in the size of the population. In this aspect, three important components should be borne in mind. One is size. Size of a population may affect because of higher or lower birth and death rates and migration factors. These affects the size of the population. Number two is place. Population studies explain the population phenomena that takes place, situation and the change in the content of the biological, social, economical settings. Third is time. The size and time do not remain same. The population change from time to time and it depends on socio-economic conditions. Next, we'll discuss composition of the population. This includes the measurable characteristics of a population in a country during a particular period. The characteristics of the population are age, sex, marital status, educational level, religion, caste, race, health, etc. The demographic study tries to find out the changes in the characters which influence the size and distribution of population because its characters generally change. The demographic studies not only study the change factor but also the variable responsible for this change. Next is distribution of populations. The distribution of population generally studies a particular geographical area. It includes percentage and density of the population in question. The factors affecting population distribution are geographical location, social position, economy, etc. It also studies classification of residents, including rural and urban residence pattern, growth and urbanization, ratio of urban and rural population, locality and residence, inhabitancies, etc. Demographic studies are conducted to see the trend population distribution, also study the density and the percentage, causes and factors affecting the population. Now, fertility, mortality and migration. You will be hearing these terms in this paper quite often, but without using these terms, no demography study is complete. The important variable like birth rate, birth order, family size, sterility, contraception use, etc. Demographic studies the influence of biological limits by social norms upon fertility. It also studies the reproductive span in addition to the psychological, social and cultural factors affecting the fertility, interval between two conceptions, abortions, etc. Another important field of study is mortality. It includes studies of sex, age pattern, cause of death, level and trends of mortality and differences in mortality such as rural, urban sector, etc. Now, migration studies the general trend of migration, migration movement, place of origin and destination, migration intervals. It also studies differential migration as age, sex, marital status and educational attainment, national and international migration. Now, labor force. The study is made of economically active population, both employed and unemployed. Social demography is the next one. It includes the study of demographical aspects of social institutions, particularly family and marriage. The study of marriage includes marital status, age at marriage, time and trend, marriage frequency, marriage by religious group, educational levels, etc. Next is population policies, important concept. The development of country today is a very much dependent factor upon population studies. Population policies include philosophy, guiding principle, organizational structure and service and supplies, educational motivation, family planning target and family planning progress and achievement, etc. Population policies in different countries are developing according to local requirement. We have given for convenience the source also. The demography has a close relationship with other disciplines, namely anthropology, sociology, geography, human ecology, cultural studies, evolutionary studies, population genetics, whereby demographic studies not only draw from all of these disciplines but also contributes to them heavily in terms of tools and techniques that are being used by all these subdisciplines. Next to discuss is importance of demography. With the majority of developing countries facing population explosion, the study of population and its problem has become very important in every sphere of an economy of a country. For the economy, the study of demography is of immense importance to an economy. Population studies help us to know how far the growth rate of economy is keeping pace with the growth rate of population. If population is increasing at a faster rate, the pace of development of the economy will be slow. The government can undertake appropriate measures to control the growth of the population and to accelerate the development of the economy. Now, rapid population growth reduces per capita income, lowers the standard of living, plunges the economy into mass unemployment and underemployment, brings environmental damage and puts a burden on the existing social infrastructure. Now, population studies highlight these problems of the economy to be solved by the government and other policy makers. For society, population studies have much importance for the society in general. When population is increasing rapidly, the society is faced with innumerable problems. Shortage of basic services like water, electricity, transport, mode of communication, public health, education, etc. All of these problems arise because of population increase. Along with these, problems of migration and urbanization are associated with the growing population, which further lead to law and order problem. Faced with such problems, which are the concomitant result of population growth, the state and non-government social organization can adopt approach or appropriate measure to solve these. For economic planning, data relating to the present trend in population growth help the planners in formulating policies for the economic plan of a country. They are kept in view while fixing targets of agricultural and industrial product, of social and basic services like schools and other educational institutions, hospitals, houses, electricity, transport, etc. The population data are also used by the planner to project future trends in fertility and to formulate policy measures to control the birth rate. Now, based on population data, projections are made about the increase in labor force and the number of people in the age group 1 to 15 years, 15 to 50 years and above in order to estimate the labor force available for productive employment. This in turn helps in making estimates regarding employment to be generated during the particular period. For administrators, population studies are also useful for administrators who run the government. In underdeveloped countries, almost all social and economic problems are associated with the growth of a population. The administrators has to tackle and find solution to the problems arising from the growth of these populations. They are migration and urbanization, which leads to the coming up of shanty towns, pollutions, drainage problem, water scarcity, electricity problem, transport, etc. in cities. These require improvement of environmental sanitation, removal of stagnant and polluted water, slum clearance, better housing, efficient transport system, clean drinking water, better sewage system, control of communicable diseases, provision of medical and health services, especially in maternal and child welfare by opening health centers, opening of schools, etc. Next is for political system. The knowledge of demography is of immense importance for a democratic political system. It is on the basis of the census figure pertaining to different areas that the demarcation of constituencies is done by the election commission of a country. The addition to the number of voters after each election helps to find out how many have migrated from other places and region of the country. Now, political parties are able to find out from the census data the number of male and female voters, their level of education, the age structure, their level of earning, etc. On these basis, political parties can raise issues and promise solution in their election manifestos at the time of elections. Further, it is on the basis of male and female voters in an area that the election commission establishes election booths for voters and appoints the election staff accordingly. Now, to summarize this topic, demography is the study of human population dynamics. It encompasses the study of the size, structure and distribution of populations and how population change over time due to births, deaths, migration and aging. Now, demography employs scientific methods of studying cause and effect relationship and has its own technique of interpreting the past and present variables so that they can be used for projecting future population dynamics. Now, demographers are interested in changes in human populations. Demographers focus on specific indicators of change. Two of the most important indicators are birth and death rates, which are also referred to as fertility and mortality. Now, additionally, demographers are interested in migration trends or the movement of people from one location to another. Now, demographers have identified a long-term evolution of demographic process known as the demographic transition. The demographic transition is key to being able to portray the demographic status of a society in terms of its fertility and mortality levels. There are four main stages of demographic stages in terms of demographic pattern from past. The stages portrays about more developed countries showing post-transitional phase, developing countries show transitional phase and least developed countries show early transition or pre-transitional stage worldwide. Demographers make use of studying population trends, developing theories of population change and analyzing the causes and consequences of population trends. Now, various demographic measures such as the ratios, percentages, rates and averages may be derived from them. The resulting demographic data can then be used to describe the distribution of the population in space, its degree of concentration or dispersion, the fluctuations in its rate of growth and its movement from one area to another. So, this is all about the topic. Thank you very much.